Folks, we're here in Jackson, North Carolina. This is the farm of my son and I, Ben Moses and son. We farm North Hampton, some in Bertie and in Hampton County. All of our soybeans, corn, and wheat is what we grew. Cover crop one, I think, is initially was designed for erosion. Erosion ain't more of a problem right now. What we're doing is actually we're using it as a tool. When we speak cover crop, we can use oats, sometimes we use wheat, or sometimes we use barley. It all depends on which wood you have, and costly they're probably about the same, but one thing we found, wheat is a little heavier. Sometimes the barley, just depending on what it weighs, you can get a better pattern. When we're spreading cover crop, one thing is real important. Most of the time we're doing it is in the morning when the dew is on. See, the air is heavier. Ideally, if you had an airplane, it would be better if you could fly it on. And as the foliage is killed by the frost and covered, that works wonderful. What we try to do is harvest, and in the morning while the dew is on, we'll spread our cover crop, and the next day or so, whatever time allowed before it germinates, we'll come in with the terrigator. And it doesn't disc the land, it basically aerates, and it doesn't disturb it very much. And we call it tickling, just to get a little better ground contact, and compared to just spread it and not tickle, we call it. It's probably 80-90% better germination on it once you run that terrigator over and tickle the soil. And believe it or not, early on, anything you can get done latter September, early October, you won't see much difference. But I think for our region, being the barley is out of the mountains and it's colder there anyway, that has done just as well, if not better, than wheat in this part of the country for us. As long as we've got cover on it, we're drawing moisture from there, and that way it isn't standing there with the water that is falling during the winter not being used. And we're going in, got a root that's opening up this clay soil, and also it's taking some of the moisture to help us dry it down so we can get on there quicker. We call ourselves cheating nature by letting it do its own work. And in so doing, if you allow that cover, the bigger it gets. And sometimes we'll end up, if it isn't as big as we want, we'll plant in it and don't kill it. Come back once the crop is up, burn it down, put the acephate in there with the Roundup to keep the insects from attacking the plant. And then once it lay down at 12 inches, it established another blanket. So then that gives us a mulch barrier that will hold moisture during the summer. So it's a win-win. And once it lays down, if it covers 30% of the weeds, that's just a number. We save a sprayer and a half spraying by using the cover crop. No-till is the only way that we can figure that we do what we do. And it's hard enough to do it doing no-till. We couldn't afford the older methods, breaking disc and spraying, bed and planting. So when we come now, the fertilizer, all of that's all in one pass. Generally, when we pick corn, we'll go ahead and sometimes we'll start corn in August, but generally it's after Labor Day, and we don't like to plant our cover too soon. We usually start our cover around October-ish 10th to the 15th. But see, if you went in and started your cover crop in August, nice and warm, ideal conditions, it'll have heads on to be that big. See, and then if it's a mature crop, it's not going to stand that winter if you let it get too big and get cold weather. See, and then when it burn it, it generally don't pull out if it's too big. So that's the reason we usually start around October-ish 15th. Any sooner than that, you can do that, but there's no point in running out there and let it get too big and then the weather damage. And as you see this that we have now, we were down 10 degrees for 4 or 5 days back to back. That's not common here. And it has galled our cover a little bit. It's much better than what last week it was yellow. But now we don't top dress our cover crop. We don't want to add any more of the cost of fertilizer. You don't want to add any more to the cost of it. But now when it warms up, it's enough nutrients left from last year to get cover to where it is. What we were doing when our acres were not as big and we had more time. But when the acres got bigger, the only way to get there, you got to carry a wider streak and you got to go faster. So we had to adapt here again, and when change comes, you got to change attitude. So in order to make that work, we didn't have a choice. And I said in a previous video, a lot of this stuff we didn't want to do, but we didn't have a choice. Now you just think, if we had 4 or 5 people, if you could find 4 or 5 people that knew how to drive a tractor and do that, you'd be paying 4 people, so it would be 6 of us trying to do the same job, and that's what it would take if we were doing it the old way. So if we were doing it the old way, we'd be out of business because we couldn't afford to do it anyway. So the 2 of us are doing what 6 people normally would do. So that's why we think we're making money. We may not be, but we feel better about it. Does that make sense? Okay, there we are.